Harry does not deserve armed royal security. His former bodyguard, and Di Davies, who is the former head of royal protection.
Canadian taxpayers spent more than £500,000 protecting Prince Harry during visits between 2014 and 2020, a notably higher figure than the roughly £330,000 previously reported. That accounted for about 10% of everything Canada spent protecting internationally protected persons during that stretch.
They've both told me that Harry's demands for armed royal protection are to do with his ego.
As the kind of thing that's harder to justify to taxpayers, since it wasn't public duty.
The idea that when he's in the UK, you have the SWAT team, you've got the blue lights, the police outriders, the helicopters.
US or UK. And the fact that Harry topped the list of protected visitors, ahead of presidents and prime ministers.
Feel royal when he's in the UK.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the recent trip
has understandably frustrated some Canadians, especially amid cost of living pressures. Which brings us to the ongoing question of Harry's UK security. This is genuinely contested, even among royal commentators who don't always agree. Details from the late Duchess of Kent will have become public, and that's notable because most senior royals, going back generations, have been granted special permission to keep their wills sealed.
But traditionally, the senior members of the royal family have, by special dispensation, been allowed to actually have their wills kept secret, ban on seeing the contents. But even in 90 years' time, two judges are going to sit down together privately, open the will, and then decide whether they should make it public or give it another 90 years. So 100 and whatever it's going to be, we may never see their content. So we've never seen any member of the royal family's wills, really, in the past. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, we don't know.
And it supports young musicians from low-income families. That was an incredible passion of hers. She was a teacher forever. She said her children had no idea that she was royalty. They all just called her, by her name. And it was a very sweet and humble life that she lived. £5,000 to her grandchildren, her husband, 1.4 million, her jewelry to distribute.
In this case, we're seeing a modest estate. Roughly £1.4 million left to her husband, £10,000 to future talent, the music charity she helped build to support young musicians from lower income families, £5,000 to her grandchildren, and provisions for her jewelry. She's remembered as someone who lived unusually humbly for a royal. Famously, her own grandchildren reportedly didn't grow up thinking of her as royalty at all, just as family. This naturally brings up an old, murkier story. Princess Diana's will. Diana signed her will back in 1993, before her divorce from then Prince Charles, and her roughly £21 minus £26 million estate was split between William and Harry. But there was also a separate, handwritten letter of wishes, not legally binding, that asked for 3/4 of her personal belongings to go to her sons, and 1/4 to be divided among her 17 godchildren.
So it's a great irony. By the way, Duchess of Kent, what a wonderful person she was.
Yes.
She was so beautiful, she was so graceful, and she was the very best of this institution. Somebody that was productive, gave things back, never put a foot wrong. Can you think of
the wills to ensure that most of it went to Harry and Meghan versus all of these godchildren she had? I remember that.
Well, you're testing me now. I can't actually quite remember whether Diana. I'm pretty sure her will was kept secret as well in the entirety of it. We do know, of course, of certain bequests that were made and others, and that's because many people around her knew precisely who was getting what. But I can't quite remember. But I'm quite sure that hers. Although actually, now that I come to think of it, maybe it wasn't because she was no longer a member of the royal family. So, it's one of the few times you've got me now in my history here. I can't actually quite recall whether she was included. It was only in 2021, actually, with Prince Philip, that we got this idea of having a 90-year rule. And because that 90-year rule came in 2021, we do have the wills for several royals who died between 1910 and 1923, because the 90-year rule has passed for them. So we have, but as far as I know, anybody after 1923, we don't have access to any of their wills.
Buckingham Palace is preparing to search for a new principal private secretary after Sir Clive Alderton announced he's stepping down in May 2027, following 20 years in the royal household. This is a big deal. The principal private secretary is often described as the monarch's closest advisor.
The search for the king's new top aide. Buckingham Palace will soon begin the search for a new principal private secretary as Sir Clive Alderton prepares to step down in May of 2027 after 20 years in the royal household. Often described as the king's most trusted advisor, the role oversees the king and queen's official engagements, provides strategic counsel, and helps manage major events such as the coronation.
Steering the institution through Andrew's fall from public life, Harry and Meghan's departure, and the death of Queen Elizabeth, all while, by most accounts, keeping the king out of major missteps. He's also a familiar name to anyone who's read Harry's memoir. Harry gave nicknames to several unnamed palisades in the book, and the most pointed one, the Wasp, is widely understood to refer to Alderton, whom Harry cast as one of the biggest obstacles to any reconciliation with the king.
Yes, it's hard to think of another private secretary who's been in that role for such a crucial point for the royal family. Quite remarkable. Retiring at the age of 60, rather than you would have thought perhaps 65 or 60, that the private secretary to the king is the king's right-hand man, is his closest advisor, helps him with all of the critical issues that he has to deal with on a daily basis, as well, of course, as being the key conduit between the government and the palace. So whenever the prime minister has something to deal with the king, it's through the private secretary that they will go, and of course also with the state visits. And they've had in Sir Clive Alderton a really skilled man, somebody who, of course, Prince Harry called the Wasp. Somebody who was not a fan of welcoming Prince Harry back into the fold. In his memoir, Spare Us All, Prince Harry describes, three middle-aged white men. Now, who's going to replace Clive Alderton? Well, one of the contenders is obviously the Deputy Private Secretary.
He's married into a prominent international family and has diplomatic experience that reportedly helped smooth the king's state visit to France and relations with the Trump administration.